Hello? Okay. All right. So thanks very much for having me here. It's always great to be back to Hong Kong. As both had mentioned earlier, I got my master's degree in Hong Kong U, so Hong Kong is really, really special and really great to be back. All right. So what we're going to talk today is wisdom of institutional crowd and implication for anomaly returns. It's going to be a joint work with our PhD student, Chen, and my colleague, Gerard Hoberg, who, if you don't know, is like really, really deep in the technical analysis, machine learning, these technologies. And of course, he knows everything. All right, so let me try to give you a little bit of a background, how we want to do this paper, and then I'm really looking forward to your comments and suggestions, of course. So let's give it a try. All right. So if you think about in the financial markets, we know that it's well known that institutional investors they lack information, right? And when they lack information, a lot of times they won't get higher outcome, right? Okay. Question we want to ask today is, other than trading on information, how can an institutional investor use the information in any other ways? And you will see what we want to show you is at times they can have incentive to share information with others. And specifically, we're going to study a mechanism for institutional investors to share information via the news media. Therefore, we're going to exploit the implications of this mechanism. Okay, so where does our paper stand in the literature? So let me give you a little bit about the background here. So there has been a massive literature on media and finance. Think about papers like Paul Tadlock, who is our UT Austin faculty with Columbia. And a lot of this literature focuses on how investors respond, right, to news. So typical setup is like today there's a news, positive tone, negative tone. And then we look at like intraday or next day stock return, right? Do people respond to news, right? Okay. The place where we come from is that if you open the Wall Street Journal, you're going to see a lot of times that the news itself has institutional investors contributed to them. So in other words, sometimes institutional investors proactively engage with news. It's not like everybody, you think about hedge fund managers, they're just sitting there waiting for the news. They can proactively interact with journalists, right? Okay. And I'll give you a number, just keep this in mind. If you look at all Wall Street Journal textual content, 1% is about institutional investors. So we're not talking about peanuts. Okay, there's a lot of institutional investors engaging news generation. Okay, so where does that lead to? Well, that's going to be this red line. Conceptually, we want to make an argument, and we'll try to prove with data that institutional investors can also sometimes endogenously generate news rather than just responding to the news. Okay? And the mechanism we're going to try to rely on is essentially a Bruner-Brunemeyer coordination game. Okay, so I'll get there in the next slide. Okay, so very quickly, so far what I've talked about is hopefully I can sort of open the door that institutional investors not sitting ducks. Okay, they engage, they are active. All right, so how does the paper work? Our paper essentially studies the implications of institutional investors' ability to share information through news media and the implication for momentum value anomalies. Okay, so both has mentioned a lot about the momentum. I learned a lot, and we're going to talk about a slightly different way of looking at momentum today as well. Okay, so this is going to be my most important slide, actually. If I get this through, I claim victory, because I'm going to talk about the mechanism, very nutshell, okay? All right, so here we go. Now, consider you are a hedge fund manager, right? So let's take Garvin. Garvin is a hedge fund manager, and he discovered that all growth firms in the tech sector are overpriced. This is like think about like 6 months ago, right? We're thinking about Tesla, a little bit overpriced, right? Okay, so you found this news or this information, this signal, that's great. But too bad, government only manages $1 billion. Now, we know if you want to arbitrage a giant factor, you need a lot of money. So 1 billion, unfortunately, is not enough. So what happens is, if most other investors don't know about the signal, and government went on and traded, so you place your order, right? You try to short growth firms in the tech sector. What's going to happen? Well, because your trading flow is too small compared to the majority, there's no price impact. So you're not going to realize the return immediately, right? So government had to wait. You're going to wait until more and more people try to start to understand that there is this pricing, and then when everybody trades, which over the sell flow, order flow overcomes the resistance from the rest investors, that's when the price corrects, right? Therefore, the key message we want to bring to you is that for government, you can get your return eventually, but how fast you can realize your return is beyond your control, right? If you just trade on it, you have to wait either 3 quarters or 3 months. It depends, right? So the question is, you have the information, can you do anything else to make your return realize faster? And of course, that will be our channel. We're going to say, if the institutional investors share the signal with median, and then Ben will jump in and say, oh, wow, I found in Wall Street Journal there's this interesting article talking about tech firms or growth firms in tech sector are overpriced. Let me dig into that, right? Let me verify that information. And then if I figure it out, I can talk to the news too. Then another day you found my talk on the Wall Street Journal. So now you can see, when more and more institutional investors engage with median about the signal, more and more institutional investors will trade on the signal, right? Therefore, we can expedite the trading volume, and we can expedite the price correction. That is essentially our paper's mechanism. There's nothing more I can show you today for the mechanism part, okay? So the bottom line is, by sharing your signal through Wall Street Journal, which is the medium we're going to study today, you can shorten your holding period, which essentially makes you less worried about holding strategy for too long, which we know is very costly, right? Because you never know when you're a hedge fund manager, you really want to get your strategy to get closed as fast as possible to make money, right? Okay, so with that mechanism, what's going to be important for asset price is the following. As you can see, if the price correction happens only after a cascade of Garvin, Ben, and you, talk to the median, then we're going to have an implication here for asset price, which is news involving this cascade or increasing amount of institutional investor signal sharing can foreshadow the price correction or anomaly return, right? So that's the asset pricing implication we're going to explore today. Okay. Okay, so this is exactly what we do in this paper. First, we're going to try to develop a conceptual framework. It's really like a simple extension of a Bruder-Brunner. You know my paper, they all have like very trivial models, so they'll talk to Gerard. He's going to laugh at my models because it's all very simple stuff. But then the point is that we add a median to this coordination game. We're going to say, if you have the information, you have the information, and you guys talk the median, then everybody can get your information quickly so you guys can make money quickly, right? That's the model. And the paper is very much empirical. So please don't judge if you're the referee, don't judge my paper by the model, but please look at the empirics. So we're going to build a very novel measure we call InstaSpread. Essentially, it captures intensity of institutional investors' signal sharing activities in Wall Street Journal. Precisely how we do that is we're going to go, we follow this like millions of Wall Street Journal article text. And we're going to do a textual analysis to measure in each Wall Street Journal article the intensity of institutional investor making predictions in the article. And that will be our measure. And we aggregate everything to industry. I'll show you a second how we did it. Now, once you have this measure, think about this measure as tech industry versus oil gas industry. How intense in this last month the institutional investors talk about the sector, okay, in Wall Street Journal. That's the Wall Street Journal InstaPrep. We're going to show you first result is asset pricing. I'm going to show you that this measure strongly boosts or amplifies or predicts anomaly returns. The magnitude is not trivial. A 1 standard deviation increase in our InstaPrep will boost momentum by 50% and value by 30%. So next time, if you're worried, you're curious, where can I find a better momentum or better value returns? Look at our measure and then look at industries have our high InstaPrep. You're going to get a much better deal than industries with low InstaPrep. Okay. Now, the biggest issue in this literature is to address endogeneity. So we're going to precisely divide 2 tests to clear our channel. And I'll tell you up front, the biggest concern here is omitted variable problem. And then I'll show you how we address that endogeneity concern here. So hopefully with point number 1, I can show you that our measure, just like our model predicts, amplifies the returns. Next, in the second bullet point, we're going to also look at institutional investment trading. Because you might think, well, this institutional investor may just be blocking, right? They go to Wall Street Journal, they talk about it, but they never really act on it. So did they really act on those strategies? And we find, yes, they not only talk the talk, they also walk the walk. Because the Wall Street Journal InstaPrep measure can also reflect institutional investment trading of momentum and value. Essentially, you're going to see that the active institutional investors trade both value and momentum way more actively when InstaPrep is high. So now you have a cohesive picture that when institutional investors talk with Wall Street Journal, they not only traded on these signals, but they also realize the return, right? So it's both quantity and price are cohesively telling us that our model is likely to work. In the last, we're going to open up a little bit. Remember, our measure is just a measure the intensity of how government talk to Wall Street Journal. There's one caveat with our measure, which is I don't know what exactly government talk with Wall Street Journal. The truth is that even if you want to figure out how a person talks to another person, there can be 100 narratives, right? You can say the growth firms are bad, or the value firms are good, or you can softly indicate that. So how can you get a better sense of what exactly did government talk about to the Wall Street Journal that boosts the momentum, and what did he talk to the Wall Street Journal that boosts the value, right? So to do that, we're going to be very humble. We're going to be very agnostic, basically saying, I don't know what government talked to Wall Street Journal exactly. I know he talked a lot, so our intensity measures high, but we don't know the content. However, we're going to try to use the Bright Kelly's like 180 topics in Wall Street Journal. So if you are familiar with his work, he has they've done like a LDA to decompose Wall Street Journal articles into very different topics, right? So we basically say, let's bring Bright Kelly's topics, and then let's say which topic boosts momentum and which topic boosts value. And this is where we really don't have any judgmental view on anybody's research. We're just reporting facts. We show that when government talk to Wall Street Journal about some macro topics, that's when the momentum is starting to be showing up. And when it talks to the Wall Street Journal about corporate topics, that's when the value is showing up. How would this apply to different theories? That will be the next paper. We wouldn't have much thing there, right? So this last bullet point, take it as something for fun. Okay? All right. So I'll clear a couple of contributions to literature, and I'll dive straight into our paper. So first question you might ask, look, Ben, your model has nothing to do with momentum value, right? This institutional investor, they can trade on any signal. Why? Momentum and value. Well, the short answer is the following. Remember, if you want Garland to talk to anybody and convince you there's a momentum that you need to trade on it, there are two assumptions here. First, you guys should both know what you're talking about, right? So the point is momentum value are well known among everybody. So you talk about that, I can understand. If you Garland talk about a really small, strange, niche trading strategy, even if I read Wall Street Journal, I may not figure out what strategy he's talking about, right? So that's one reason we look at value momentum, because they are indeed everywhere. Second, you need the strategy to be large enough that Garland cannot trade on his own. So this is a very common question I get, like, man, why don't you look at the stock level return, right? Why do you look at the momentum portfolio, right? The key reason is that this momentum and value in each of the short and the long legs, they have lots of systematic components. You can't really trade one stock and get a momentum. It's very hard. You need to combine lots of stocks, right? We call them losers and the winners, right? That's a portfolio of lots of stocks. So you need this portfolio with systematic component that one investor cannot fully trade on it. That's why Gerard needs to share with you, right? If he can trade on everything, he's not going to share with you, right? So that's another reason we choose momentum value, because they have systematic components and they require lots of liquidity to trade on. So to put together, we think this is a test of thought, nice playground for us to test our theory. Last point. What do we add to the media literature, right? There has been tons of, papers talking about news articles, anomaly news articles, and stock returns. We think there are three contributions here. One is, if you look at the past literature on textual stuff, it's still very much about tones, positive tone, negative tone, right? Sentiments, so on and so forth. We, on the other hand, we're going to be one of the few first focused on content. That's why we bought these Wall Street Journal articles. We do our own analysis, try to, distill how much does institutional investor make prediction in this article, right? That's a very different thing of trying to say this article is positive or negative, right? I think the most interesting part is the second. Remember, a lot of this median asset pricing papers about short term, typically 1 day or 3 days. There's news today, it's good news, so stock price goes up tomorrow. That's typically set up. And I get it, why they do it, because endogeneity, right? You want to have very clean identification that the only thing happened today is this news, and the only thing happened tomorrow is price move, right? So to do that, you can't lag too long. If you say, oh, there's a good news today, and after a month, there's a return. How do I know, right? It's coming from this news today. Therefore, they are always looking at short term. Now, the problem is, if anybody wants to connect this short-term news channel mechanism with momentum value, which majority of us know is at the monthly level, it's going to break down, right? Because you can't say anything about news and monthly momentum or monthly value. So we think our paper is actually nicely able to connect that. Because remember, for our model to work, we need Garland to talk to Wall Street Journal, and then we need Ben to follow Garland to talk, right? So our mechanism is like slow-moving accumulation of the information sharing. And then essentially, you're going to see in our measure, we say that only when this signal sharing lasts for 3 months, that's when you're going to you start to see the result. That's when the price starts to correct, okay? So our paper essentially nicely connects the median literature to the anomaly literature in that sense. Lastly, we're going to try to make a point that a lot of the media literature try to treat investors as passively responding to news. We're going to try to make an argument that at least partially or sometimes, if you're a big institutional investor like Garland, how much money you have, right? Or Goldman Sachs, right? Or your Bill Ackman, you do have the power to influence the news. And we think this is a fruitful literature for maybe our PhD students to explore further, that we think there's a very little exploration now that dive into the textual content to see how different investors actively engage in news and then influence other investors, right? That's like a less studied, at least in my reading. So news can be endogenously generated by certain investors, which I mean institutional investors. Okay, that's the big motivation. Let's dive into our exercise today. So the data we're going to use today is we call this Dow Jones Historical News Archive, which essentially have 1.5 million articles from 1980 to 2020. These are the pound of text, right? Then we're going to try to merge with a bunch of other data. I'll talk about them when we get there. So first question, how do you measure instant spread? Basically, how do you measure institutional investors talk very, very intensively with Wall Street Journal about tech sector, right? How do you measure that? Here's how we do it. We go to each Wall Street Journal article. The article is about tech sector that's already labeled, right? It's a tech sector news article. And then we do a very simple analysis. We got 250 keywords for institutional investors and 250 keywords for predictions. So, you can think about big hedge funds, mutual funds, and they're all keywords for institution, right? Big institutional keywords and the predictions. Once we have the keywords, we basically look at the Y variable is each article's text, and X variable is the keyword for the institutional investor. Then we do this simple cosine similarity of each article text with the institutional investor. So this cosine similarity essentially tells you in this article how intense it reflects institutional investor, right? Similarly, you do another cosine similarity which tells you how intense this article reflects prediction. We multiply that together. Our interpretation is that's the interpret at article level, which tells you for this article how intense it reflects institutional investors making predictions. Okay? So that's the intensity measure. As I mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't tell you what Gerard said. It only says Gerard said a lot, right, in this article. Okay, great. Once you have this measure, we're going to aggregate everything to the Gamma French 48 sector industry level. And remember, the key innovation here is that we're going to look at the access interpret. That's important, by the way, because as you can probably imagine, Wall Street Journal will, when it comes to financial sector, like banking, maybe a lot of bank names will, institutional investor name will show up, right? That's just the level. So what we do is we want to get rid of level. We're going to look at a normal institutional investor engagement in Wall Street Journal about a particular sector. In that case, we're going to look at the past 3 months of Instapred minus the previous year's moving average. So this is like suddenly this last 3 months, Gerard talked a lot about predictions. Okay, that's our measure. Now I will show you a cascade of results. Okay, that's pretty much all the rest of the talk today. First thing is if our model is correct, we would say that in industries where institutional investors talk a lot, then the price is more likely to converge, right? Than industries where nobody talks about, no institutional investor play the game. So in that sense, when you run a Macbeth regression of return on Anomaly, so think about Anomaly here as a book to market or past 11-month return, right? Interact with our measure, you would predict a positive coefficient here, which essentially says Instapred amplify momentum or value, right? And that's exactly what we see. You run the interaction term, after return interact with Instapred, book to market interact with Instapred, you're going to see very significant results here, right? As I mentioned earlier, all coefficients are standardized. Therefore, you can calculate the importance of Instapred. Essentially, if you increase Instapred by 1 standard deviation, you get 63% more a momentum return. Okay, great. Now, loss of robustness. Let me skip that. Picture probably can tell more than everything. So here I'm simply showing you the same result, but now I'm showing you graph. Got 5 more minutes. So the red line is the industries with high instant spread. The blue line is the industries with low instant spread. What's impressive about this figure is that, as you can see, the red line is pretty much about the blue line all the time. So this is consistent with our mechanism is arbitrage mechanism, right? We don't rely on macro. So there's no crash or there's no kind of business cycle. Similarly, if you look at value, it's similar effect. The red line is pretty much always above the blue line. So good news is you can probably make money any period of time in the decades before, right? Okay, so next, endogeneity. I'll show you the endogeneity concern and I'll show you quickly how we did it. The biggest endogeneity concern is, what if there is an unobservable factor at the industry level that drives the momentum and value next month and is correlated with your instant spread, right? Then you're doomed because it's not your mechanism. Reason without your mechanism, that unobservable factor will drive your results, right? So to do that, we're going to try to do the following. The intuition is the following. Our mechanism relies a lot on whether my industry's investor, Garland, is connected to Wall Street Journal, right? Think about this. There are two sectors. Garland invests in a sector and he's connected to Wall Street Journal. I invest in another sector and I'm not connected to Wall Street journalists. Then you can imagine this mechanism is more likely to show up in his sector, in my sector. I don't know how to play the game, right? I'm not connected to Wall Street Journal. So indeed, what we did is we cut the sample into two industries where the investor and Wall Street Journal has high connectedness and low connectedness. Low connectedness and high connectedness. Indeed, you see in the high connectedness industry, you see the greater results. And when you look at industries where institutional investment doesn't have connection with Wall Street Journal, there's nothing, right? So that's one way to try to show some identification. The next one is even sharper. We're going to say, okay, Garland, great, you're connected to Wall Street Journal, but too bad, your journalist just left the Wall Street Journal. Then the departure of the journalist, your connected journalist, would function as a rough shut off, right, of the channel, because now you talk with it. You need to be connected by your journalist is gone. So the prediction would be during the period when a connected journalist leaves your Wall Street Journal, then the mechanism you see should be less, right? It be tempered. And is that true? Yes. So industries where you have a high exposure to turnover of the connected journalist, you see the shutdown effect. You don't see the prediction, right? Amplification here. So that's the best we have here for identification. We have more than we know. Next one, very simple. Next one, we want to say, okay, so far you saw the asset pricing result. That's in the return part. The question is, did Garland really trade on the strategy or not, right? Our model predicts that Garland not only because he traded and then he disseminated the information, that's why there's a price correction, right? So indeed, when we look at Garland's institutional ownership of the stock, what you're going to see here is that when instant spread is high, Garland trades much more aggressively on the anomaly, right? Similar here. When instant spread is high, he trades much more aggressively on value as well. So that's what we call, you're also walk-to-walk rather than just pop. Okay. Last thing, okay, great. Last thing I want to show you is, as I mentioned earlier, our instant spread measure is the intensity measure. So can we look into the black box of what the government say in the Wall Street Journal and what exactly boosts momentum value? Yes, we can. As I mentioned, we're going to use Brian Kelly's topics. Essentially, what we did is pretty straightforward. We simply interact our regression with each of the Brian Kelly's topics. And then I'm going to show you my last graph, and that will be it. So in this graph, let me just quickly show you. I have two dimensions. The Y is the T statistics of the triple interaction term. Essentially, the higher the T statistics, it means this particular topic boosts momentum. The higher this statistic in X, that means this topic boosts value. Okay, so I'll leave it to you to judge, right? Those topic boost momentum are much more like economic growth, sovereign debt, and macro data. And those topics that boost the value are, executive comp, management change, more corporate, right? Okay, so to wrap up, we think our empirical and theoretical work really trying to bring three messages to the crowd. One is we really want to say institutional investors sometimes they're not sitting ducks. They can have incentive to engage in news production, and we should pay more attention to this. So the second message we want to show you is this fact we found that this median asset pricing literature and the typical anomaly literature, despite they used to have different horizon, right? One's daily, the other monthly, our mechanism can connect them together, right? Lastly, we think this is probably the future we're lying into, is that if you believe our mechanism, you can really use our framework to really do a much better job than I showed you with the T-specific graph, to dive into what theory explains momentum, what theory explains value, by using textual messages, right? Textual content. All right, that's it. Thank you so much. I look forward to the discussion.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the organizer for inviting me to be here. I'm Dashan Huang. I'm from Singapore Management University. Okay, what's here about this paper? Because Ben did a fantastic presentation. So here I just quickly summarize the paper. In other person, there had been a long-standing debate about efficiency between an aggregate market and an individual firm, which is more likely to be expressed. Based on Samuelson's dictum, we argue for the aggregate market because if there is any mispression, if you want to correct the mispression, it will be harder for you to correct the aggregate market mispression because you need a lot of capital. For any individual investor, you cannot correct, you cannot move the market. That's the dictum. And this paper argued that, okay, we know that individual investors, they are capital constrained. However, investors, they are human beings, they are smart. We can coordinate each other to move, to correct the mispression. So this paper used and show how institutions use financial media as a channel to share their private information with each other. If they jointly move the market, invest in the industry, then they can move or they can correct the mispression. So that's it, what this paper is doing. Investors share their signals of private information through Wall Street Journal. And beyond that threshold, then they trade. If their capital investing in the industry beyond a threshold, then they can correct the mispression. And this paper had a very wonderful theoretical foundation based on April and Bruno Mir paper. Okay, actually, when I was a student, it took me 1 month to read the paper, but I didn't benefit anything from the paper yet. Then the next question is, if they can coordinate, how do we capture, how do we measure the coordination? That is the key. We don't know how. In the literature, some people just use the institution coding stuff to look at how do they coordinate each other, but coding can be determined by many things. It's just an outcome verb. So this paper say, okay, let's look at what they say. And the author they just look at, for example, here is one article from the Wall Street Journal. And you can, from this article, you can find 3 elements. institution, forecast, industry. So based on these three elements, Ben proposed an institutional prediction measure. Use this measure to capture how investors institutions coordinate each other. Based on this measure, to me, that is the key finding in this paper. So if we get an institutional prediction measure across industries, then we can sort group industries into two groups, low institutional prediction and high institutional prediction. So between the two groups, you can find that momentum and profitability and value are much more predictable in high prediction industry. That is the key finding. So institutions share their information, they trade, and then in a high prediction industry, you can get more profits. That is the key finding of this paper. I do believe it. I'm a retail investor. He is my role model, Bruce. And he has 3 books teach you how to trade as a retail investor. And you for him, this is a blog from him, and he argued that for all price, there is no noise. Any movement, any tick movement has a reason. It must be driven by institutions, not any retail investor. I don't believe it. So I believe this paper may get a lot of attraction from attention from institutions, from practitioners. This is what I mean. Okay. Then the question is related on how to test the mechanism. Ben did 2 tests. The first one is let's look at any institution can post can write something. Then the question is whose prediction are more reliable? This paper argues that if the industry, the institution have a better relationship with Wall Street Journal economists, then their prediction should be more reliable. So the effect should be stronger. They also do find the result. Based on the better, closer relationship between investor and Wall Street Journal, the effect is significant. And the other group of results. That's the first. Their talk are informative. The second one, in addition to look at what they see, they also look at what they do. Here, if that's the case, they share their information. It means that's a cheap talk. But here the author show that they don't trade as this way. So they just look at the active institution and the inactive institution. They find that for the active institution, if the institutional prediction is high, it's more aggressive. That is the second test, which can deal with the endogeneity issue. To me, that's a wonderful paper. This is not a typical discussion, but most of the discussions we hope we do more. But today is my main discussion. I hope we do less. The first way is I know you use the everywhere paper to motivate. I agree with you. Value and the momentum both are important. However, that paper also say that momentum and the value are negatively correlated. Here I just use the data and applied the momentum and the value, the correlation is negative 0.25. And the Java paper argued that they can do diversification, dividing both value and momentum. However, in this theory, you see that the institution predicts momentum and the value simultaneously. So this is still counterintuitive. From mathematics, it's not. You just argue, okay, the institution prediction considers two components. Actually, based on your brand Chinese keywords, you just look at the economic keywords for momentum and the keywords for value. You actually combine two index, two measures. So here, if you really want to focus on both, maybe here you need some discussion. That is my first comment is maybe you can just focus on one, not two. Here, suppose if you just focus on momentum, I can find a lot of supporting evidence supporting. For example, Long's paper, he argued that momentum is driven by institutions. So here is kind of the same, and recently Doyle, Jagdish, and Sobra have a Bergen paper. They look at all momentum drivers. They conclude institutional underreaction or information diffusion seems the only driver of momentum, which kind of consistent with the results. That's my first comment. Why if you just focus on momentum, I believe our results are very convincing to me. And if you just focus on value, maybe you need more discussion. For example, here, Chen was recently working paper. He decomposes value into two components. One is based on intra-industry. The other one is based on inter-industry. And they find that the intra-industry and the two values have different drivers. And your article is handled at the industry level. So if you just talk about value, maybe you need to take a look at their paper, try to see whether your evidence is more related to the actually inter-industry evidence. And they also, I also did this kind of line test. Here it is. For momentum, I can find if I just go and down sort, here I cannot find the result. But just now, if I look at the momentum here, I just go down sort, this is between the holding and the momentum. I don't find the stronger result for high institutional industries. So that's you can also consistent with your result arguing for momentum. But for value, here maybe you need more discussion. Because of course, I really, I can just, we cannot use the institutional ownership passively. Maybe I didn't categorize active and inactive institution. Maybe you can look and find some result. Okay. So that is what I mean. You may just focus on value or momentum, not both. If you focus on both, you may need more discussion. So here is point. Okay. You see that, okay, if I can focus on momentum or value, the paper is not big. Look at my type of anomaly returns. I want to make my paper big. One, the comprehensive study. Just look at all anomaly. You can just use the mispresent score or cover this score. Or you can construct any mispresent measure by yourself. Here, all the data are kind of public available. You can just pull out with some trends, the data library, Laurie Marks data library, or Candy, Brown Candy's data library. You can find out whatever mispresent you want. So you can make your paper very big. Okay, that's my just one point. And my third point is also a major point. At the end of the day, who drives the mispresent? Who kills the mispresent? Clearly you are talking about that institutional investors coordinate to attenuate anomaly to correct the mispresent. But that question is who generates the mispresent? In your paper, is kind of retail investors, they do not have any pool. So that's the question. Okay, if you think institutions kill the anomaly, then who generates the anomaly? And regarding this question, the literature is really ad hoc. For example, Naga's paper, they argue that anomalies, institutions kind of kill the anomaly. And they argue that anomalies are stronger within a low institutional ownership firm, because for those firms it's hard to short sell. So short sell constraint generate anomaly. And for example, however, if you look at the value paper, they argue that institutions do not treat anomaly at all. And another paper talking about institutions treated in the wrong side. They also look at the number of institutions and group anomaly defined a positive relationship. Say they conclude institutions do not attenuate anomaly. Instead, they exaggerate anomaly. And the last paper, they say that, okay, institutions are different. Mutual fund investors are dumb, and hedge fund investors are smart. So one type of mutual fund exaggerates anomaly, and the hedge fund attenuates anomaly. So theory is still at the heart. Maybe you can talk about some. I'm not saying you need to do anything, but maybe you need to make it clear. Okay, we just talked about based on the existence of anomaly, how do investors coordinate to attenuate the anomaly? Anyhow, this is a wonderful paper to me, 5-star paper, and I learned a lot. And you have a very good foundation, and you propose a trading strategy. I just created paper strategies to make some money, and I believe this will have enough authentication because it's related to several fields, capital analysis, efficiency, or institutional trading stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing it in print. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. for a great discussion. Everyone. Okay, in that sense, let me thank Dashan for a wonderful discussion. I think I spoke too fast, and the way you speak makes me feel so comfortable. Thank you. I guess I will directly address some comments later when we talk, and then more broadly when we have one-on-ones. Because some comments we already thought and how to incorporate. So let me maybe open up a little bit to the crowd. If you have any more questions, feel free to fire. As I said, it's the work in progress, so anything is really helpful. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I would think about from hedge fund managers' point of view, what could be the cost of releasing such a signal? So basically, I think maybe you can check with investor flows to see if the hedge fund manager released something wrong, then do investors punish fund by withdrawing money? And if that's the case, then in equilibrium, then releasing a signal is essentially a risk-taking behavior. The benefit is, as you mentioned in the speaker, I can shorten my holding period, and the cost will be when I'm taking more risk, then maybe if I'm wrong, investors punish me by taking money off the bond. So
yeah,
so
okay, great point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me very quickly address that. Very quickly. So one main reason we use Wall Street Journal, you can use Twitter, by the way, right? You have all the textbook stuff. Why we look at Wall Street Journal? One reason is that we think Wall Street Journal is much better at safeguarding information. So if you know how journalists work, I actually written a paper on generative AI. I have to say I didn't spend tons of time in it, but got like an invitation from Wall Street Journal. I realized the way Wall Street Journal works is like there's so much integration. That's like right now we are writing my paper. Like Wall Street Journal articles is also like there's so much iteration. They do want to safeguard whether what you're speaking is more likely to be right or you're just bluffing, right? Or you're just wrong. Okay, so bottom line is that we think using Wall Street Journal is more reliable. This information got already checked in a way. Ex post, nobody knows, right? And so ex ante, I think that's a better source to safeguard that. But you're well pointed, well taken. I think there's more elements there. I'll talk more with you. Yeah.
Hi Ben. Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't write the paper, so my question may be on the chat. Okay. So I was thinking, so if the continuing investor wants to cooperate with each other, they have alternative ways to do so, right? They can talk in the inside forum, they can go to the class. Why they want to use Wall Street Journal? So that's why I have alternative explanation here. So if that is possible, the student investor already choose the action. And then it's through Wall Street Journal to pull the information. So in that situation, attract all the regular investors to follow. So in that situation, it's going to explain the result as well. And also maybe you have to understand why the new result is stronger for momentum instead of value. So do you think they also explanation? So my suggestion would be maybe you can look at the lead lag between the talk and the work.
Yeah.
Do they actually take the action first, then disclose with the news article of the pattern?
Well, that's a great point. We got this a couple of times ago. Yeah, so the short answer is that we think it's possible. What you're saying is definitely possible. On the other hand, that's also our model as well, right? Because if you can convince anybody, you don't have to convince another institution investor. If I can convince the majority of retail investor households to trade with me, that's also our mechanism. So I'm happy. I'm totally okay with that. Empirically is hard because the trading data, quantitative data is every quarter. There's no way I can say in high frequency who is early, who is late, right? I got one more minute. Okay.
Good one more. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the great discussion. And the second question, maybe we can discuss later.